My golden child brother laughed in my face. Did you really think Grandpa would leave you more than pennies? That house, the land, the savings, over $600,000, all in his hands. That was 6 months ago. But Grandpa left me a secret treasure, something he hid just for me, and when I finally found it, it flipped all my brother's dreams upside down. Yesterday, he called me crying. How could you do this to me? My golden child brother laughed in my face the day the will was read. Did you really think Grandpa would leave you more than pennies? He sneered. The house, the land, the savings, all mine. $600,000. That's what he bragged about. 600,000 that he swore belonged to him and him alone. And I'll never forget the look on his face when he leaned back in his chair, smug as a king, and added, "Don't worry, Hannah. You still get Grandpa's little coin collection. Maybe you can cash in a nickel or two." That was 6 months ago. Yesterday, he called me crying. His voice was cracked, desperate. How could you do this to me? But to explain how we got here, I need to go back. Way back. I'm Hannah. I'm 27 now, but sometimes I feel like I've lived two very different lives under the same roof. One is the overlooked daughter. The other as the granddaughter who found a place she actually belonged. Eric and I grew up in the same house, but you wouldn't have thought so if you saw how we were treated. He was the golden boy, the miracle child. When he was born, Mom said it was like a light entered her life. When I came along 3 years later, well, let's just say the light had already taken up all the space. Mom adored Eric. Every grade school drawing went on the fridge. Every soccer game was a future scholarship. If he forgot his homework, the teacher must have been unfair. If he got in trouble, the other kids started it. Me? I was sweet but quiet. Responsible but not exciting. At least that's how Mom described me to relatives during holidays, right before she launched into a 20-minute speech about Eric's brilliance. Dad was different. Quiet, steady. He didn't play favorites out loud, but he rarely spoke up either. If Mom was cheering, Dad was nodding along, which meant that most of the time it was Eric's show and I was the audience. But Grandpa saw me. He wasn't flashy. He didn't shower me with praise. What he gave me was something smaller, but deeper. His time. His attention. His trust. I still remember the smell of his workshop, sawdust and oil, with a faint hint of pipe tobacco he hadn't touched in years. He'd sit on his old stool, hunched over a broken radio or clock, and he'd let me sit beside him, handing him tools too big for my hands. "Patience," he'd say, squinting through his glasses. "Everything worth fixing takes time." Sometimes we'd walk his land together, the crunch of gravel under our shoes, his cane tapping against the earth. He'd tell me which trees he planted himself, which fences he built, which stones he remembered tripping over as a boy. He had this way of speaking like the land was alive, like it carried memories you could only hear if you were quiet enough. Eric never came on those walks. He was too busy with friends, or football practice, or begging Mom for the latest video game console. And maybe that's why Grandpa and I had our secret bond. In the last few years of his life, when his health started failing, I was the one who stayed. I drove him to doctor appointments. I organized his pills. I cooked meals when he was too tired to stand at the stove. Eric visited occasionally, when Mom reminded him, but it was always a performance. He'd sit by the bed, crack a few jokes, take a selfie for Instagram, and then leave early because the guys are waiting. I think Grandpa noticed. Actually, I know he did. Because one evening, not long before he passed, he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Don't ever let anyone tell you your worth is less just because you don't shout it. The quiet ones, we see more than they realize." At the time, I thought it was just one of his thoughtful little sayings. I didn't know it was a warning. A warning about what Eric was planning. The day of the will reading is burned into my memory. We all sat in the lawyer's office. Eric, Mom, Dad, me, while Mr. Jacobs, Grandpa's attorney, shuffled through his papers. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old leather, the kind of smell that makes you feel like you've already done something wrong. My palms were sweating against my skirt. My throat felt tight. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but part of me hoped Grandpa would have left something that proved he'd seen all the hours I'd spent with him. Something that said I mattered too. Eric, of course, Looked like he was about to walk a red carpet. He was practically vibrating with excitement, like he was about to be crowned king of the family. He leaned back in his chair, bouncing one leg, smirking at me out of the corner of his eye as if to say, "We both know how this is going to go." Mom sat next to him, smiling so wide it hurt to look at her. Her hand rested on his arm like she was showing off her prize. I could already imagine her bragging later. "My son the heir, Grandpa trusted him above all else." Dad sat quietly, arms crossed, his jaw tight. He didn't look at anyone. That was just Dad, present but detached, as if he was always watching things happen instead of living them. Finally, Mr. Jacobs cleared his throat. His voice was steady, professional, but I swear the room itself held its breath. "Your grandfather's estate is valued at approximately $600,000, he began. "This includes the house, the adjoining land, and his savings accounts. According to this will." I held my breath. My heart hammered in my ears. "The estate will pass to his grandson Eric." It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Eric's grin widened immediately. He leaned back in his chair even further, stretching like a cat who'd just stolen the cream. He looked around the room like it already belonged to him. Mom's hand squeezed his arm proudly. "See," she whispered, though loud enough for me to hear. "Grandpa knew you'd be responsible. He knew you'd take care of things." Dad exhaled a low sigh, but he didn't say anything. He didn't look surprised. I sat frozen, waiting for my name, hoping there was more. "And to his granddaughter, Hannah," Jacobs continued, "he leaves his coin collection, with the hope that she may find it of sentimental value." That was it. A single sentence. Eric snorted. Actually snorted. "Pennies," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. Then louder, with a smirk plastered on his face. "Guess it fits. Hannah gets the pennies." He chuckled to himself, already pulling out his phone. I wouldn't be surprised if he was texting his friends right then and there, probably making a joke out of it before we'd even left the office. I stared at the table, blinking hard, willing the sting in my eyes to go away. Mom patted Eric's arm again like this was some big coronation. "Grandpa trusted you, honey. He knew you'd carry the family forward." Her words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being invisible again. About being told, without saying it directly, that my place was small. That Eric was the future and I was background. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stayed quiet. I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd either say something I'd regret or break down in front of all of them. And Eric didn't need another reason to laugh at me. Mr. Jacobs slid a leather case across the table toward me. It was worn around the edges, heavy in my lap. I traced the latch with my finger numb. Eric leaned closer, grinning. "Hey, maybe there's a rare nickel in there, Hannah. You could sell it for $20. Big win, right?" He laughed at his own joke. Mom chuckled with him. Dad stayed silent. I wanted to disappear. Later that night, when I was finally back in my apartment, I set the case on my kitchen table. My little one-bedroom smelled faintly of pasta from the night before, the hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. I turned on the lamp and just stared at the case. For a moment, I didn't want to open it. Because if it really was just coins, pennies, nickels, whatever, then Eric was right. And the thought of him being right again made my stomach twist. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I unlatched it slowly. The lid creaked open, revealing neat rows of coins. Silver dollars. Old nickels. A few foreign ones I couldn't place. At first, that was all I saw. Just coins. And I almost laughed. Because of course Eric was right. Of course I'd gotten the worthless scraps while he got the estate. But then I noticed something. Tucked between the rows were folded slips of paper. At least 4 or 5, carefully placed as if they belonged there. My heart skipped. I reached for the first one, my hands trembling. Grandpa's handwriting stared back at me, shaky, faded, but familiar. The note said, "If you're reading this, Hannah, then you were the one who cared enough to look." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears welling up before I could stop them. This wasn't junk. This wasn't just pennies. Grandpa had left me something after all. Something no one else in that office even thought to notice. And I had no idea then, No idea at all just how much those little slips of paper would change everything. The weeks after the will reading were torturous. Every time I saw Eric, he acted as if the estate was already his. The house, the land, the $600,000 in savings. All mine, he said with that smirk that always made my stomach twist. And the coin collection? He'd tossed it at me during the lawyer's meeting like it was a bag of candy. Here, sis. Enjoy your pennies, he'd laughed. But he didn't realize what he had just handed me. At first, I pretended it didn't matter. I went about my life quietly, keeping the coin collection in a safe corner of my apartment. Every evening, I would sit at my little kitchen table, opening the leather case carefully, unfolding Grandpa's notes, smelling the faint hint of his pipe tobacco clinging to the paper. I read and reread each one, tracing the loops of his handwriting, the way he had numbered things, the subtle little doodles he'd left in the margins. It wasn't nonsense. It was deliberate. Every line felt purposeful, like he had left me a trail, tiny breadcrumbs only someone who truly paid attention could follow. One note caught my eye in particular. Check what you've been given, not what you've been told. I frowned. That didn't sound like rambling. That sounded like a clue. Eric hadn't cared. He had laughed at the coins, brushed off the notes, and gone on his merry way, confident that nothing of real value had been left to me. Mom barely looked at them either, dismissing them as trivial, sentimental nonsense. But I had always been closer to Grandpa. I remembered his voice when he spoke to me across the dinner table. The quiet ones, we see more than they realize. I started examining the coin collection more carefully. Hours passed as I slid coins back and forth, inspecting each one. Some were tarnished, some pristine, some had faint scratches. And one, just slightly thicker than the others, seemed to hold a tiny bulge beneath the velvet lining. A pattern was forming. I worked late into the night, moving coins, unfolding notes, following the subtle hints Grandpa had left. My hands ached, my eyes stung, but I couldn't stop. Something told me the truth was hidden here, disguised as trivial pennies. And then I saw it. One coin, carefully pushed aside, revealed a thin envelope tucked beneath the lining. My heart raced. I lifted it slowly, feeling the weight of the paper in my hands. I could smell the faint scent of Grandpa's old pipe tobacco lingering on it. The handwriting was unmistakable. The real will. Eric had mocked the collection, thought it was worthless. Mom had barely noticed. But Grandpa had trusted me to find it. And I had. For a long moment, I just held the envelope, letting the magnitude of it sink in. The estate, the land, the house, the savings, they were supposed to go to me, according to Grandpa's wishes. Eric had been laughing, thinking he had already won. And now everything could change. I couldn't act rashly. I knew Eric well enough to understand that if he suspected I had found the real will, he could become aggressive, manipulative, or even try to hide it again. Mom might side with him out of pride, even if deep down she knew the truth. Grandpa had taught me patience, and now I had to apply it. So I waited. I spent the rest of the night going over the notes again, reading and rereading, piecing together Grandpa's intentions. Every subtle clue, every seemingly trivial comment now made sense. The coin collection, dismissed by everyone else, had been a hiding place. A test. And I had passed it without even knowing it. The next morning, I called Mr. Jacobs, Grandpa's longtime lawyer. His voice was calm but firm when he answered. "Hannah," he said, "are you sure you've got it?" "Yes," I whispered. "I found the real will. Grandpa hid it. He wanted me to find it." There was a pause. Then, "Good. Keep it safe. Don't tell anyone yet, especially Eric or your mother. Come see me tomorrow. We'll go over it together and make a plan. Timing is everything." I hung up and held the leather case close to my chest, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The leverage was mine, but I couldn't misuse it. One wrong move could blow everything. Grandpa's lessons about subtlety and patience echoed in my mind. Everything worth fixing takes time. That night, I sat in the study again, coins arranged meticulously, notes tucked between them, the envelope hidden safely beneath the velvet lining. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice. "Patience, Hannah. Watch carefully. The quiet ones hold the most power." I smiled. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I wasn't just a bystander in my own family anymore. I had discovered the truth, and now I had the power to see Grandpa's wishes fulfilled. Eric might have thought he had one. Mom might have been blinded by pride. But Grandpa had trusted me, and I hadn't let him down. And soon everyone would see. The next morning, I called Mr. Jacobs. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed, the leather coin case resting heavily on my lap. When he answered, his voice was calm but firm, like he always had a way of making me feel safe and serious at the same time. "Hannah," he said, "are you sure you've got it?" "Yes," I whispered. "I found the real will. Grandpa hid it. He wanted me to find it." There was a pause. I could almost hear him thinking. Then he said, "Good. Keep it safe. Don't tell anyone yet, especially Eric or your mother. Timing is everything. Come see me tomorrow. We'll go over it together and make a plan." I hung up and stared at the coins for a long moment. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. This wasn't just about money. This was Grandpa's legacy, his final instructions, his trust in me. If I misstepped now, it could all be lost. The next day, I arrived at Mr. Jacobs' office. The building smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, the kind of smell that made everything feel serious and important. I carried the envelope carefully, as if any sudden movement could destroy the fragile truth inside. "Let's see it," he said, gesturing for me to hand it over. I slid it across the desk, my fingers lingering just slightly, almost afraid to let it go. Jacobs examined it meticulously. He scanned every line, every signature, every notation, his brow furrowed. I watched him, my stomach tight. Finally, he nodded slowly. "This is legitimate," he said. "Notarized properly. Dated after the version Eric tried to present. Your grandfather was deliberate in his planning. He anticipated this moment perfectly." I exhaled. Relief mixed with adrenaline. I held the leverage now, but I couldn't act recklessly. If Eric found out I had the real will too soon, he could try to hide it again, challenge it, manipulate Mom, or make a scene. The timing had to be perfect. Jacobs looked at me thoughtfully. "Hannah, you've waited patiently. That patience is your greatest weapon. The controlled reveal is key. We'll need a neutral setting, all parties present, for maximum impact. That's when the truth lands hardest." "And Mom?" I asked, suddenly anxious. "She'll hear it," he said. "But the truth is undeniable. The more confident Eric is, the bigger the impact when we reveal this." I nodded, letting the weight of his words settle. Grandpa's lessons about subtlety, observation, and patience all clicked into place. I wasn't just holding a document. I was holding the culmination of years of guidance and trust. We spent the next hour outlining a careful plan. Jacob suggested a formal meeting with Eric, Mom, and Dad. Neutral ground, professional. No one could manipulate the moment. He explained how to present the will, how to maintain calm, and how to let the legal authority underscore the truth. Every word reinforced the power of strategic patience. When the meeting was over, Jacobs handed the envelope back to me. "Keep it safe," he said. "Grandpa trusted you with this, Hannah. And now so do I." We wait for the perfect moment. I left his office feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and calm. The real will was secure. Grandpa's plan was intact. And now all that remained was timing. Timing, and the perfect reveal. That night, I returned to the coin collection. I traced the edges of each coin, unfolded the notes again, and touched the envelope tucked beneath the velvet lining. I could almost hear Grandpa's voice. "Patience, Hannah. Everything worth fixing takes time." I smiled to myself. He had taught me to see what others didn't, to notice the small details, to understand that the quiet ones held the most power. And now I understood exactly why. I spent hours that night mapping everything in my mind. Eric's arrogance, Mom's pride, Dad's quiet observance. Everyone had their predictable reactions, just as Grandpa had predicted. If I moved too quickly, I could ruin it all. If I waited, if I executed the reveal perfectly, it would be devastatingly effective. I leaned back in Grandpa's old chair, listening to the quiet of the house. The coins gleamed softly in the lamplight, a subtle reminder that the smallest, quietest actions often carried the most weight. Grandpa had trusted me. I hadn't failed him. And soon everyone would see. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. Eric was already strutting through the lawyer's office when I walked in, grinning like the world was his playground. Mom followed close behind, eyes shining with pride, convinced that her golden child had rightfully won. Dad trailed quietly, as always, observing everything with that steady, calm gaze that made me trust he had my back without saying a word. I held the envelope carefully in my bag, my heartbeat steady but loud in my ears. This was it. Every precaution, every patient hour spent decoding Grandpa's notes, every quiet night with the coin collection had led to this moment. Eric flopped into a chair, leaning back with that smug grin that had haunted me for months. "Let's get this over with," he said. "I've got plans tonight." Mom gave me a look that I interpreted as a mix of curiosity and confidence. She didn't know the truth yet, but she believed Eric was untouchable. That was going to change. Jacobs folded his hands, his calm presence filling the room. "Before we continue," he said slowly, "I need to clarify something. The will you presented 6 months ago, it's invalid." Eric froze mid-smile. His face, once so sure and untouchable, flickered with confusion. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice cracking ever so slightly. Jacobs slid the envelope across the table. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, just let the moment hang. "This," he said, "is the latest notarized version, dated after the one you claimed. It leaves the estate, the house, the land, the savings, to your sister Hannah." Mom blinked. Shock painted her face. "That's impossible. I saw the will myself." Jacobs shook his head, calm and firm. "The document you saw was not legitimate. This one is. I've verified it." Eric snatched the paper, scanning it frantically. His face drained of color. This is fake," he stammered. "She planted it." I leaned back slightly, finally allowing my voice to break the tense silence. "Grandpa trusted me with the coin collection," I said. "He knew you wouldn't care about it. That's where he hid the real will. He planned for this." Eric's eyes snapped to me, filled with a mixture of panic and disbelief. "You knew? This whole time?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I waited. Because Grandpa told me once, the truth doesn't need to scream. It just waits to be seen." Eric's chair scraped harshly against the floor as he pushed himself up. No, this isn't fair. That money is mine. It was always supposed to be mine." Jacob's voice cut through, calm but absolute. "Not anymore, Eric. It never was. Your grandfather's wishes were clear. This document is verified, notarized, and filed. Any challenge you make will fail." Then Jacobs did something unexpected. He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a small, simple wristwatch. He held it up for everyone to see. "Eric," he said, his tone almost gentle, "this was left to you by your grandfather. He said it might be the only thing that teaches you the lesson he hoped you'd learn. Maybe only time can teach you." Eric stared at it blankly, confusion, frustration, and disbelief all mingling in his expression. "A watch?" he scoffed weakly. "What am I supposed to do with this?" Jacobs shrugged slightly, a small knowing smile on his face. "Perhaps nothing. Or perhaps it will remind you that patience, humility, and observation are worth more than arrogance and shortcuts." I glanced at the watch on Eric's wrist now. Grandpa had planned this perfectly. He had given Eric something tangible, something to remember, but the estate, the true inheritance, was safe. And I had been the one he trusted to understand it all. Mom's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her face was pale, the proud illusion of her golden child shattered. She glanced at Eric, searching for answers, for some explanation that would make sense. But there was none. Dad stayed quiet, as always, giving me the smallest nod. It was his way of saying, "You handled it well." I felt a rush of gratitude, a warmth that reminded me why he had always been my quiet support. Eric's breathing was shallow. His hands trembled slightly as he held the fake will. "No, I can't. This can't be real." I let myself smile softly, almost dryly. "It is. Grandpa planned for this. And he trusted me, not you, to see it through." For the first time in years, the golden child had nothing to say. His arrogance had been stripped away in a single, decisive moment. He had mocked me, belittled me, ignored me, and now, the truth had flattened him completely. Jacobs cleared his throat. "This meeting is concluded," he said. "The estate is under Hannah's care. Everything is now legally and officially hers." Eric didn't argue further. He couldn't. He slumped in the chair, defeated, muttering under his breath as he tried to process what had just happened. Mom left the room quietly, stunned. Dad lingered a moment longer, his eyes meeting mine briefly, a silent reassurance. Then he followed Mom. I stayed seated for a moment, looking at the envelope, the coin collection, and the quiet room. Every detail of Grandpa's plan had worked. Every patient night, every careful observation, every small piece of the puzzle had led to this moment. Eric stormed out at last, slamming the door behind him. No words, no threats, no smug grin. Nothing. The golden child, stripped of his crown, had nothing left. I exhaled and ran a hand over the coin collection. Grandpa had trusted me, and in trusting me, he had given me more than just money. He had given me lessons in patience, observation, and quiet strength. Sometimes I still think about Eric, about the arrogance that made him blind, the confidence that made him careless. I imagine him replaying this day in his mind, wondering how it all slipped away. And I smile quietly to myself. Because patience, careful attention, and quiet strategy, those are the true legacies. And in the end, the quiet ones, the ones who see more than others realize, hold the most power. Grandpa's voice echoes in my memory, "Maybe only time can teach you." And now it has. The days after the meeting with Jacobs were quiet. Almost eerily so. Eric disappeared for a while, retreating to his friends and social media, but noticeably quieter. No more public bragging, no more casual gloating. I could tell he was recalibrating, though I didn't need to watch him to know the damage had been done. His confidence, that golden child swagger, had been cracked, maybe even shattered. Mom hovered somewhere between denial and reluctant acceptance. She still wanted to believe in Eric's rightness, but even she had to admit the facts were undeniable. Dad, as always, stayed quiet, but his small nods and the occasional lingering glance told me he had seen everything unfold exactly as he had anticipated. He'd trusted me to handle it, and I hadn't let him down. I settled into a new rhythm. Grandpa's house was mine to care for. The land remained untouched for now, and the savings were carefully accounted for. The coin collection sat proudly in the study, every coin aligned perfectly, every note tucked safely between them, a silent reminder of patience, trust, and subtle power. Some nights, I'd pick up a note, the paper rough under my fingers, the faint scent of Grandpa's pipe tobacco still clinging to it. I'd read his words over and over, each sentence like a lesson, a whisper from the past, the quiet ones. We see more than they realize. I smiled at the memory of him. Grandpa had always been subtle in his teaching, never demanding, never shouting, and now finally I understood why. The coin collection, which Eric had mocked so casually, turned out to be the key to everything. A simple trick, really. Hide the most important document in plain sight where no one thinks to look. Eric hadn't given it a second glance. He had been too arrogant, too impatient, too sure that wealth alone made him untouchable. And that was the moment I realized something profound. The real treasure wasn't just the house, the land, or the savings. It was the trust Grandpa had placed in me, the lessons he had given me, the patience he had taught me, the quiet victory, the subtle power of being observant and deliberate. That was worth far more than money. Eric, of course, was still Eric. A few weeks later, I heard through Mom that he had been ranting to friends about the unfairness of it all. But I didn't respond. There was no need. His world had shifted, and that was punishment enough. He had been taught, in the quietest way possible, that arrogance and carelessness weren't enough to secure everything in life. I spent more time in the study now, sitting in Grandpa's old chair, tracing the edges of coins, unfolding notes, feeling the texture of his handwriting under my fingers. I marveled at how thoughtfully he had planned this, how he had anticipated the way each of us would react. The lessons weren't loud or flashy. They were quiet, subtle, powerful. And I had finally seen them. Sometimes, I think about Eric, the golden child who had laughed at me, dismissed me, underestimated me. I imagine his smug face from that day at the lawyer's office, frozen now in memory. And I can't help but smile, quietly, dryly, because the smallest, quietest actions can be the most powerful. Grandpa's words echo in my mind, "Only time can teach you that." And they did. I often catch myself reflecting on how much patience, observation, and quiet determination matter. It's a lesson that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Eric may never understand it fully. Mom may never forgive the embarrassment. Dad may never say much. But me? I know. I lived it. I saw it. I succeeded because I trusted myself, and because Grandpa trusted me. I lean back in the chair, letting the weight of the coins and notes rest on my lap. The room is quiet, the land still, the savings untouched. Everything Grandpa valued is preserved. Everything Eric thought he could take is finally settled, in the hands of someone who truly understood. And that, I realize, is more than enough.